All right, so good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly McDonald with Detail Roofing, and I'm also joined by two of my colleagues today, Michelle Wallace-Carswell and Andrew Tate. They're both account managers, so some of you may have talked to them or know them from previous jobs. So today we are going to be talking about avoiding bad roofing jobs. Now, for starters, what do we mean when we say bad roofing job? That can be a bit subjective. It could be somebody thinks it's a bad roofing job because it's not visually appealing. However, what we're specifically looking at today are any repairs or installations that were not completed properly and therefore lead to deficiencies and potential for interior leaks. We run into a ton of situations where somebody has their roof replaced, no matter what type of membrane system that it is, and within either months or a few short years of that replacement, they're already having various leak issues, usually not localized, it's widespread in a number of units, very shortly after the roof has been replaced. And a lot of that time, it does come down to improper installation. So just a high-level overview of what it is specifically that we're going to be looking at today. For starters, we're going to be talking about the factors to consider when completing any roofing project, regardless of the roof system or the type of membrane. From there, we're going to look at some photo examples and further details on where we tend to see improper roofing installations and repairs most often, and then just some tips and recommendations on quality assurance for roofing projects. At the very end of the presentation, we will be doing an open forum Q&A. There were some questions sent to us in advance at the registration, so we will address those at that point. Also, if at any point during the presentation you have a question and don't want to forget it by the end, please feel free to pose it in the chat and we will address it at the end of the presentation. So when it comes to completing a roofing project of any kind, the thing to remember here is that there are so many different types of roof membranes and waterproofing systems available. There are some companies that focus really on one particular type of system. Like, for example, there's some companies that really only do shingle repairs and shingle replacements. So that might not be the best person to hire for a flat roof project, or regardless of the membrane system. But again, because there are so many systems available, it's also very important not just to have the technical training and experience, but also to be following the guidelines outlined by the product manufacturer. So with the manufacturer, they provide information such as installation requirements. They do have tips on best practices for installation. And then some of the other documentation that they provide for the various products also includes information on surface preparation, product compatibility, material storage and handling, and weather and temperature requirements. A lot of these things can have a major impact on the repair. Even if the technical application of the roofing system was done well, if the surface wasn't cleaned properly, or if the materials, the accessory materials used weren't stored properly and are beyond their lifespan or are no longer usable, then there could be issues with the overall roof system, with the adhesion and with the lifespan of the roof system. So where we tend to see some of the issues most often, first and foremost, probably the most common that we see is with the modified bitumen membrane installation. So just a bit of background on this. This photo example here is what the modified bitumen, also known as 2-ply SBS, styrene, butadiene, styrene, what that looks like. So it is an asphalt-based 2-ply membrane system for flat or low slope roofs. Installation methods can vary. It is primarily torched on. However, there are also cold ply applications or peel and stick applications. And of course, with these different application methods, there are going to be different guidelines and different requirements provided by the manufacturer. This roofing system can be exceptional. It can be very long lasting, provided it is installed properly and maintained over its lifespan. As we mentioned, though, the issue is that so often we see issues with the installation of this particular membrane system, and we see issues and leaks popping up months or only a few short years after it is originally installed. So just a few basic requirements on the installation here. Again, the manufacturer is going to provide information about the substrate and what the membrane can be applied directly on, but typically you're going to have your insulation level, an overlay board, and then the first ply base sheet followed by the second ply cap sheet. It's incredibly important that this is installed both on the field surface, which would be the horizontal surface, as well as the cap sheet membrane going up any vertical points such as parapet walls, exterior walls, curbs for things like skylights or mechanical and HVAC units. Another important thing to consider is that each of these runs for the installation should be staggered. So the cap sheet membrane is going to be slightly staggered from the base sheet. Similarly, with the stripping membrane, it's going to overlap the field membrane, which is also going to create a lot of redundancy in this upturn here, which tends to be a weaker point. And just showing an example when the guidelines are followed, a bit more like what that looks like. So again, we have the first ply base sheet installed to the field surface, installed with a staggered run on the parapet wall. For the stripping is going up and over top of the parapet wall and overlaps with the field membrane 4 to 6 inches here. Same thing with the cap sheet membrane on the field, and then cap sheet over the stripping membrane for the parapet wall and overlapping the field a few inches there as well. So when guidelines are not followed, that is where we tend to see some issues. In some cases, you can have really glaringly obvious issues like we have in this photo here. This is one of those examples where I just genuinely don't know what the person who installed this was thinking, even if it was a temporary solution. It's just kind of draped over, but also torched at the side here, wide open. Not only is it not technically correct, visually it's not appealing. Cases like this, it's easy to spot and say, okay, there's something wrong here and we need to do something about it. Other cases can be a little harder to identify because there might not be openings in the membrane or wide gaps where you can identify that water is going to enter at some point. So in this case, on the right-hand side here, in the field surface, everything seems to be okay. With the stripping membrane though, that vertical going up and over the parapet walls, this here is not installed to the guidelines outlined by the manufacturer. In this case, the contractor just applied kind of randomly. It looks a little patchy throughout. Over here at the scupper, you can see there is a piece that's starting to lift a little bit. At this point, there wasn't an immediate concern. There weren't any leak issues occurring. It didn't seem like anything was going to happen anytime soon. However, it is a situation where it's recommended to monitor because there could be issues with the laps in the seams over time that can lead to leak issues. So in general, if you are having a project completed, whether it's a major repair or a replacement, even if you don't know the exact specifications outlined by the manufacturer, you do want to see a cleanness and uniformity in the installation of this particular system. So if it does look patchy and just kind of non-uniform, it might be something to question. So usually what we're seeing is issues with the overall adhesion. And again, that's going to play into the application method and issues with how that was applied. In these cases, it's not like there's one particular thing that they didn't do correct. It could be a number of steps. It could have just been one, but ultimately something went wrong in the installation process that then led to these deficiencies in the membrane. So what we have over here in this photo is the stripping membrane that's underneath the metal cap flashing has become completely loose at the side. There's ridging and wrinkling throughout the membrane. This seam here is also lifting, not adhered properly. So plenty of areas for water to get in. This one here, again, just issues with the adhesion in the lap open, allowing water to get in. A lot of the times too, this is something that when we're identifying deficiencies in this membrane on a particular roof system, it's usually not localized to one area. A lot of the times we're seeing this throughout the roof surface, like in this case where pretty much all of the upturns and the stripping had issues with openings present or just not going up and over as per the manufacturer specifications. Here we have a situation. This was also a parapet wall. So they did go up and over, but again, not to the manufacturer specifications, and there was issues with the adhesion here. They did install a termination bar, which can be helpful for securing the membrane. However, its placement is a little nonsensical. It's not going over the part that is actually not adhered properly and lifting. It's underneath. So a lot of issues throughout this roof surface as well. And an important thing to consider is that these issues that we see aren't specific to full replacements or new installations. It can also happen with localized repairs for damages or particular leak issues. So in this case here, there was an issue where this membrane was torch applied. It seemed like the torching application was not adequate. So there were issues with the overall adhesion. And then on top of that, they did not tie in the new membrane to the existing membrane. So this patch that was all along here was just severely lifting up on either side. So regarding the stripping membrane is incredibly important for the two-ply system. But something to keep in mind is that because of the details of going up the vertical and into corners and different things like that, is that it does require a lot of care and detail. For this reason, it can be more time consuming to complete than the field surface. However, it is important to ensure that your contractor is going to take that time and consideration to complete those details properly. Otherwise, you're going to have issues that can lead to various leaks. So we do often see issues with the stripping installation, even if the field surface is fine, no issues present. So this was another case where with the stripping, they had gone up and over partially, but then had a run here that was open all along the perimeter of the wall and allowing water to get in. This was an active leak situation. So the thing that's a little concerning here is that if you were to just walk onto this roof surface, it was accessible. There was a door that walked out to it. This wasn't something that you could immediately identify and see that there were these large openings and the membrane wasn't installed properly because of the fact that the metal cap flashing was sitting over top and covering this. So that's another reason why if you are having somebody investigate a leak issue, a lot of the times just going up and taking a quick look at the roof is not going to identify the issues. Taking off any metal, removing parts of the roof system to expose the membrane if that's required is important to really see what's going on. And just further to the importance of stripping as part of the whole membrane waterproofing system, Suprema, who is one of the leading roofing membrane manufacturers, says that the point of contact of the roof and the vapor barrier, as well as the waterproofing of the various projections, must be addressed with the same care as the sealing of the field roof surface. Something that we see not so much on a roof system that's going to be exposed to the elements, but on an inverted roof system where you're going to have the membrane covered by insulation, filter cloth, and either paving stones or gravel ballast is an incomplete system. So in this case here, and what we see from time to time is just the first ply base sheet membrane installed. And in this particular case, again, issues with adhesion throughout the stripping at the perimeter of this unit. So throughout the stripping was open at the top here. And there were also some areas where there were localized perforations in the membrane. However, it did seem to be this opening here that was primarily contributing to the leak that was being experienced. When we water tested this, the interior leak became active immediately. So next up for common issues that we see has to do with shingle installation. So when it comes to shingles and just the information that's provided by the manufacturer, not only are installation guidelines readily available online, you can ask the manufacturer for guidelines and other helpful documentation directly, but also with each bundle of shingles, the installation guidelines are actually written into the packaging. So it's really hard to miss or misunderstand anything that's written there. There's guides, there's photos, it's incredibly helpful. So a lot of the times we do encounter really small issues with the roof surface of shingled installations. And it's something that might not be easily identifiable if you're just looking from ground level. It's something that you would need to be on the roof surface to be able to identify. So just a note, we do often see situations where there are mismatched shingles used, the color doesn't match or the style doesn't match. At the end of the day, as long as they're installed properly, not the end of the world, more of a cosmetic issue. A lot of the times these are also done in emergency situations, so we understand that. However, the issue is that very often when we see these situations where there's a different color or different style of shingle being installed, there's also exposed nail heads all around. So very likely somebody just quickly went up onto their roof, nailed some shingles in, and then left. The issue with these exposed nail heads, so again, with the packaging that's provided in any installation guidelines, it is going to stipulate that the nail heads for the shingle installation should be installed underneath the shingle tabs. They should not be visible. There's even a line present on the top of the shingle just to help guide installers. So if those nail heads are exposed, it can present a leak issue and leave the roof vulnerable, especially if the nails begin to lift or rust over time, which is something that we have seen quite commonly. So ironically, in situations where somebody is going out for an emergency repair or to do a temporary repair, and they're installing these shingles just to cover up the area, by installing the nails directly into the shingle, like we see here, they could be creating more of an issue. And then another one that is fairly easy to spot because it's one of those things that it's not just technically bad, it also looks really bad. Anything like this where it is very sloppy, in this case, not even installed thoroughly, it's just kind of a shingle sitting on the roof surface here, definitely bad roofing, improper installation. This case in particular was made even worse because of the fact that where this is covering here was actually an opening for a vent that was removed. Beneath this shingle, there wasn't anything to seal that area up. So if there was ice, snow, or rain accumulating on this roof surface, then it's just huge potential for water to get in and create a leak issue into the attic and eventually into an interior space of the home. So another big one that we see regardless of the type of roof system, whatever membrane is installed, are issues with the roof flashing installation. So when we're talking about roof flashing, it's made of various materials. A lot of the time it is going to be galvanized steel, but again, that's going to depend on the particular roof system. The idea for the flashing, it's meant to prevent or protect critical areas of the roof surface and help to divert water away from those areas. So, we do see them often at any roof penetrations like vents or plumbing stacks. Anchors will have roof flashing on them. You would have flashing on the exterior of the building, any curbs, various areas like that. So if there are any issues with the installation, ultimately it's going to defeat the purpose of the flashing and can lead to leak issues. So ICO, in their guide to roof flashing installation, ICO is another leading roofing supply manufacturer. So they say damaged or improperly installed roof flashing is one of the most common causes of roof leaks. So specifically what we see, the different issues with the roof flashing, first and foremost is flashing that is not sized properly. Often that is a situation where the flashing is too big, which really there's not an excuse for. There are a variety of sizes for flashing available, and pretty much all manufacturers will also provide custom options if they don't have the particular size that you're looking for. If the installed flashing is too large, then it's going to leave voids where water can enter, like you see in these different situations. A lot of the times we see that if a contractor does install flashing that's a bit too big, they try to do something to attempt to fill these voids, but a lot of the times it's not adequate. The ultimate solution would just be to install the correct size flashing to begin with. In this case here, they installed additional fasteners to try and make it a bit tighter at the top. However, there was no sealant, there was no storm collar, nothing additional to help divert water away from this area, meaning water could get in here. In this other location where we have B-vent flashing, they do have a storm collar here. However, the flashing is so big that it doesn't even cover, or the storm collar doesn't even cover the void that's created from the large size. This one here is a bit more difficult because in this situation, it was improper flashing that was too big at a plumbing stack, but this was on a green roof surface. So again, this wasn't a situation where somebody could walk out and see that this flashing was too big right away. It had to leak and have a thorough investigation completed before we could identify that this was too large and leading to a leak issue, because there was various levels of the roof surface as well as the greenery on top of this. So another common issue that we see with roof flashing is when it is not roofed in properly with membrane. So the bases of the flashing should not be visible. This should be going underneath the membrane so that it's just this part that is diverting water down. If it's sitting on top of the membrane like we have here, even if there is a sealant applied, over time that sealant is going to deteriorate. It's not going to last forever. And especially if there's no sealant at all, then it's just an area where water can get underneath and then go down where that penetration is going through the deck of the roof and create an interior leak issue. In this case here, there was also a situation where this particular type of flashing would not be compatible with this roof surface. So product compatibility is another thing that we come across quite often. Especially with roof flashing and different roofing materials. So with the specific types of flashing available, there are various types for different roof systems and for what it is that is being flashed. So if the wrong item is used or if it's incompatible, then issues can arise, whether it's with its ability to divert water or if it's with an issue with compatibility. So in this particular case here, at this penetration, what they have here for the flashing would be adequate. However, this was another case where the flashing was too large. So what the company did to try and prevent water from getting in there was installing something on top to cover it. This is also a type of roof flashing that would be used for a single ply roof system. And again, just not adequately sealed in any way. There are openings on either side. So if snow was accumulated here, even if there was an active rainfall, it's something that could get into this opening on either side here. In this case, again, flashing that was meant for a single ply roof system was installed on a 2-ply SDS roof system, not flat or not roofed in underneath the membrane and not compatible with the roof system. So there were issues with adhesion. Two things going on there, and ultimately leading to leak issues. So when it comes to roofing projects, whatever the project may be, some of the things that can be done just to ensure quality assurance on roofing projects. For starters, number one, hire a reputable contractor. There are so many different contractors out there. And as said previously, there are some that specialize in certain fields, some that do a little bit of everything. But ultimately, especially if you don't know the contractor, you've never worked with them before, it is important to ensure that they're experienced, qualified, and reputable for the specific project that you are having completed. On top of their skill in that particular thing, other important things to consider are insurance and certifications for roofing, safety record and safety standards that they have in place, peer reviews and recommendations. If you haven't personally used them, but you know somebody that has, just getting feedback on their experience, as well as an understanding of their employees. Are their employees going to be the ones carrying out the work, or is the work being subcontracted? Just getting that transparency and information upfront. If there are any cases where there are issues with the work, or if you just have any concerns about the work that has been done or is about to be done, don't be afraid to ask for information on the product specifications, whether that be a list of what products are going to be used, or documentation from the manufacturer like technical data sheets or installation guidelines, that can just help to provide some additional information, even if it's something that you might not understand completely. You can pass it on to a third party to review and just make sure that there wasn't an issue with the roofing work because of product incompatibility or lack of surface preparation or incorrect technique for the application. If you are asking for this and a contractor is not willing to provide it or says that it's not available as far as the subsequent documentation, that can be a major red flag, because again, all of the manufacturers have this information available and it is easy to obtain. Next would be when it comes to warranties. Warranties are going to vary depending on what type of work is being performed and the scale of the work, but just confirming what warranties are in place, especially with roof replacements and larger projects. Is it covered by a manufacturer warranty, or is it just the installation warranty from the contractor? The contractor warranty should have stipulations about the workmanship. And again, the length of those warranties is going to vary on the type of work being performed. Typically for small localized repairs, the warranty period isn't going to be as long as it would for a full replacement or other major projects. Something to keep in mind if it is a major replacement, if it is coming with a manufacturer warranty, most of the time, the manufacturer warranties are quite limited and are subject to deficiencies with the actual membrane or the product itself. It does have a long list of stipulations on exclusions, and a big part of that is if it is not installed properly and not installed to their guidelines, their warranty does not cover any deficiencies with the membrane. Getting a clear scope of work is also very important. So there shouldn't be any room for interpretation with the scope of work being performed. You don't want to have any questions, or after the work is completed, have a situation where you thought something was being done, but it wasn't, and it wasn't clearly outlined in the scope of work. So ensuring that you and the contractor are on the same page and very clear from the beginning, because of the fact that the scope of work does include things like the total square footage or lineal footage of work to be completed, any other notes about the specific locations or roof areas where the work is being done can be extremely helpful, and just mitigate any issues after the work has been completed. So another thing, even if you do have the ability to safely access the roof area and walk out to take a look after the project is done, again, there are a lot of cases where the membrane might not be visible, or the metal flashing might be covering something, or again, you might not know exactly what it is that you should be looking for. So having detailed job photos, not just of the final product, but also of the progression of the work and how it got from A to B, is going to be very helpful, especially if there are issues and you need a third party to do a review of the photos and the work completed. Even if it's not outlined in a report, at least having photos of all the steps completed. It isn't a lot to ask for. A lot of, or pretty much everybody should have a smartphone now, or companies should be able to provide that so that photos can be taken and relayed back to you. Alternative to that, on major roofing projects like a replacement, to ensure that everything is being done to standards, having a qualified professional, whether it is a third-party roofing inspector or an engineer, oversee the project, or at the very least do a final review of the project is advised just to ensure that if there are any deficiencies or deviances from the scope of work or from guidelines that were specified, this can be identified early before it gets to the point where months or years after the fact, there are leaks occurring because of improper installation. So that concludes what we have for today. So we are going to open up the floor for any questions right now. If anybody does have anything that they want to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself or pose any questions in the chat. And alternatively, as I mentioned, we did get some people send in some questions during their registration. So Andy and Michelle will be able to answer some of those as well.
So I can start, Kelly. I know we got a question earlier in registration, and I know you touched on it a little bit during the presentation, but does Detail Roofing use subcontractors?
We do not know. There are certain times where a scope of work that we're recommending might need another contractor involved, separate from roofing. In that case, we would identify that in the scope of work, and it would be the corporation's responsibility to hire somebody, whether it was for plumbing, HVAC, mechanical, railing contractor, whatever that may be.
And then also, are Detail Roof technicians fully insured as well as certified?
Yeah, Michelle, I think you have
Yes.
a bit more information on that one.
Yep, all of our technicians, because they are all our employees, we are all fully insured, and we have our WSIB insurance, as well as any other liability insurance. We also have fully trained technicians, so our technicians are required to go through an internal training process that we have that's multi-tiered. And then we also do work with sending them through Red Seal programs of their choice.
Also working at heights. We're certified in working at heights. Obviously a big
Yes,
one.
thanks, Andy. Yeah, that's a big one.
Pretty important.
Working at heights,
work.
yeah, all of the, we have all of the hot work permits. We also have the training for using any boom lifts or anything like that, as well as we have a Bosun chair certification for access using a Bosun chair. And then I have a couple questions here as well that were sent in for registration. Does Detail Roofing ever subcontract? And Kelly just answered that question. I just realized, I apologize, guys, that was a duplicate. Is there any work or repairs on the roof that my super can do? Unless your super has like the certification that Andy brought up, working at heights certification, Ministry of Labor and WSAB strictly prohibits anybody to complete any work on a roof that does not have this training. As well as with all of the repairs that Kelly noted, there's a lot of manufactured guidelines and training required in order to complete proper repairs. So I would strongly advise about that. I know we get lots of questions about supers cleaning the drains. It's not just about cleaning the drains. When you should always have a qualified roofer inspect your drains once a year, just to make sure that they're functioning as intended and there's no issues with them. The other question that I have is that if a repair was completed and I'm unsure if it's correct, what do I do? So a couple things you can do. One, if you have, let's say you've taken over a building and another roofing company has been there and you're not sure the quality of the repair, you're always welcome to reach out to us and we can take a look at it for you. There's other options too that Kelly brought up. There's independent roofing inspectors, as well as you can consult a roofing specialized engineer. Just make sure that when you are consulting any experts, that they are trained in specifically in roofing.
So we did get a question from Paul Saliba. Paul asked, can Detail Roofing handle a 4,200 square foot re-roof?
Unfortunately, Paul, we don't do a lot of large re-roofs anymore. We've moved away from that from the last 10 years. We're a service-focused company. We have done multi-million dollar re-roofs in the 36 years we've been in business. It's just a different setup company. So now we really focus on service work. So preventative maintenance, leak investigations, leak repairs, that sort of stuff. We will do some small like 2-ply SBS flat roof replacements, but we don't do typically any larger ones.
Sorry, Paul, I did see the extra zero, so it's a 42,000 square foot. So same rule.
Same rule, yeah. It's just for repair crews versus production crews. Production crews are quite large. You have a lot of bodies and one foreman, and they work on different cycles, obviously, because the jobs take quite a long time. Whereas service work, you have smaller crews, 2 to 3 man crews, and the jobs last anywhere from a day to a week at the most, typically. So you can schedule and structure your company, as well as there's a lot of reporting required for service work. We fill out a lot of safety paperwork for all of the jobs that we run each day. All of our project summary reports that show step-by-step of everything. So it's just a different type of company. Any other questions in the chat?
That's it for the chat.
Okay, well, if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to email them in, as well as if you do have any concerns about anything you've seen on your roof or anything that's been done, you can let us know. We're happy to schedule a no-charge roof assessment. You guys can enter the chance to win our big April draw. If you book any no-charge roof inspection with us between now and the end of April, we have quite a nice gift. I believe it's a spa gift card, Kelly?
Yes, $200 spa gift card.
To a spa of your choice, or if you win and you don't feel like going for a massage or something like that, we can also change the gift card to a different place.
I will be sending out an email later today with some information, as well as a recording of this webinar. So if anything does come up in that time, if you do have any questions, rather about the presentation or anything about your building specifically, please feel free to let us know and we can get that answered for you. Okay, and if that is it, everybody have a nice day, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.